Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magnan. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Let's go. Master of all things tabletop. With the Paladins of Podcast. They ruin the games you love by talking rules that suck, how to build kick-ass encounters, destroy worlds, and really get your players invested. So go ahead and throw that fistful of dice at someone. Because we're going on a side quest.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to SideQuests with your Paladins of Podcast, Rob, Eli, and today, introducing Caleb. Caleb, you are able to be with us for at least one episode. We're kind of looking for some hosts and trying to see how you feel, how you fit. I'd like to let you introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about you, games you like, things you don't like, and anything else that seems fitting for the time.
Well, I'm happy to be here. This is my first time podcasting. Feels pretty good so far.
Welcome.
I've got a decent history under my belt with role-playing games. Started in college. 7 years later, here we are. And you know, my experience is mostly in narrative type systems. Of course, everybody's played a lot of 5th edition, so there's that. But my favorite stuff is the D6 dice pools, story comes first type stuff.
All right.
Any examples of game systems like that?
Oh, I could very easily point you to my favorite game system, which is the Wild Sea right now.
You know, Eli, I'm thinking you started looking in a Wild Sea group for a lot of these people we've been talking to lately.
Well, I can't help but love Wild Sea, and it's a great system. I understand why people like playing it.
Chainsaw boats to the tree canopy.
Exactly.
So that's the only thing I remember by this point, by the way, of Wild Sea is chainsaw boats through the treetops.
Well, that's part of the beauty is like that's all you need to know to start playing, but it goes so much deeper than that. You can spend as many hours as you want in that world.
Nice. So you said that's kind of your favorite system at the moment, most recently. What was it prior to Wild Sea?
Prior to Wild Sea, what was I?
It's not appropriate to ask about someone's ex, Rob.
You know, this is the kind of hobby where we all like to know where we come from. Come on.
Prior to that, I was probably focused on either Free League's Forbidden Lands or John Harper's Blades in the Dark.
I like Blades in the Dark. I think that's a really neat system.
I've always wanted to play Blades in the Dark, but I've heard it's a very difficult to GM game, or at least there's a lot going on.
Only if you care about the lore. I mean, they tie everything very densely together in that book. Every district of the city is detailed, what every faction is doing, and all that good stuff. So if you try to stick to all of it at once, you're gonna have a lot of tabs open in your brain. But if you're okay with improvising some things and either retconning or ignoring them later, it becomes a lot smoother.
Well, isn't kind of their I want to say combat system essentially a big retcon, isn't it? Like you screw up and then you get a chance to rewind and be like, hey, this is why we ended up screwing up. And then it progresses from there.
Not just the combat system, but the whole game really is split into 2 different phases. There's like a downtime phase And then there are the heists or the missions that you go on. So being based around heists and like heist movies and those tropes, whenever you encounter a problem that you're not sure you can solve directly by rolling, you can choose to spend basically some of your HP, your stress, to do a flashback and detail how you would have set up for this beforehand.
I like that. That's probably my favorite part of the entire system. Um,
Are there any
Eli,
other games that do flashback systems like that? I can't think of any off the top of my head.
I want to say I read about one, but I can't for the life of me tell you the name of it. I want to also say it was a modified Blades in the Dark system, which, if I remember correctly from there, that is modified off of Powered by the Apocalypse at first, and now it's its own thing. It's the Blades in the Dark system now, so it's its own thing.
Yeah.
So, if you follow that line, there are other games, but again, I get stuck playing Super Crunchy, which is fantastic, but it does not allow me to branch out with my current group of people very often.
There are a lot of games that use the Powered by Apocalypse system. There's like the Root RPG, the Avatar, although I guess those are designed by the same people.
Right. But when you look at the difference between Blades in the Dark, that specific flashback system, I don't remember seeing in Root or Avatar.
No, me either.
So even though they have that same base, they have varied greatly.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's a fun system. I think I've actually listened to a few actual play podcasts about Blades in the Dark, which is really incredible. It was kind of neat. It felt more cinematic than a lot of actual plays you listen to. So Eli, if you have a chance, I would recommend checking out one or two of those. So it's good. All right. Now, are there any systems that you absolutely hate, Caleb?
Ooh, systems that I hate. I'd have to play a lot more games than I read in order to hate one, I think.
Sure.
I am kind of a 5th edition hater. Not because it's bad. I think it's very capable at being the popular game it wants to be. But I've seen so many other systems do things better that people complain about with 5th edition. I've become the number one 5th edition hater that I know of.
Hey, that's fair. That's fair. I've learned from Reddit of all places that I am supposed to hate Fatal, which after reading everything about it, I'm sorry, I just cannot. It seems obnoxiously over the top and ridiculous in all the wrong ways, and it seems incredibly offensive. And by God, I'd like to take a look at it at least one time in my life.
I'm not the biggest fan of Paranoia, just because it's
really
well, it's just so chaotic.
Okay, I can agree and see that. But it tracks with your love of narrative games, and it's sci-fi if you just decide to put it on spaceships, right?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of changing systems genres or changing the lore of what a game is set in. Or at least I think that RPG systems should highly tie into whatever their lore is. I think it allows you to be a better rounded or themed game.
Right. I think we talked about that. Just sort of buy into it. Like, don't skirt around it. Don't go with no theme. Don't try to cover them all. Buy in. It gives you more depth, is what we said last time, right?
Yeah. Everything's following a theme.
Mm-hmm.
You must love the Fate system then.
I'm not the biggest fan, but then I mean I've also some of my favorite games that I've played in I played in like a Heroes game, which is one of those design everything about your character, everything's a build point, and that was a great. So a little bit hypocritical.
You never know what you really like until you try it out, and you never know what you don't like until you try it out, man. Not hypocritical. It's all good. I got your back, bro. I got your back. Um, Thinking of while we're on this kind of line of thought. Never mind, scratch that. It left as soon as it hit me. Nope, there, it's gone. Sorry. I hate being that kind of guy today, but I'm a little over caffeinated. I took a nap beforehand, so I'm well awake for now.
Up and down at the same time.
Dude, so bad, so bad. Caleb, you brought some interesting things that you also wanted to talk about. I'd love to jump right into some of them. We kind of touched a little bit lightly on systems. We can talk about your different combat systems that you like. Eli was really enamored with the idea of the faction meta game aspect. I don't remember how it was worded.
Yeah, faction, running a faction or faction metagames.
Yeah. No, which sounds interesting because I generally look at running factions as more of an organization, and I treat them like individual cities.
Oh, individual cities. Could you elaborate more on that? I'm curious what you mean.
Yeah, so every faction would have sort of like their head, their right hand, their de facto leaders in case if anything was to fall apart. Everything is bureaucratically organized to some degree. And then they all operate semi-independently as like city states, all within the local area, depending on what their goals are, vie for power and certain things.
How do your factions, in the way that you organize it, interact with each other? How do they advance their goals, or how does the current faction status change?
Usually by party interaction. It's not something I dump a shit ton of time into unless it helps push the story's narrative.
Sounds efficient.
It's a lot of my players don't take time to join factions. They're like, I want to go on the Adventurers Guild and kill shit. So that's what they do.
Makes sense. You build the game around what your players want to do.
Lately, yes, very much so. So, how about you, Caleb? This faction metagame. How do you handle it?
I can tell you about the deepest faction metagame I ever played with, and one of my favorite was from Birthright for second edition D&D.
Woo, Birthright.
Yeah, that is probably my favorite D&D setting. I know I just said I'm a D&D hater, but that setting's different. That's a whole another animal.
Mm-hmm.
That one is all about running kingdoms and thieves guilds and politics, and it had a very robust system based around that, where you're making rolls to like do war moves across the map. You're moving troops. You're collecting taxes. You're spending however much gold on your palace to give you diplomacy buffs. And it's a lot of fun as long as you're enjoying that and you're not waiting to, okay, when do we get back to the party adventure?
So now, was your campaign a mix of that? Was it a campaign of or a mix of dungeon delving and then this faction level play?
It didn't get too far along. We had 2 or 3-ish faction turns, and we were doing it kind of Game of Thrones style, where our characters were separate at the beginning. So there was almost no interaction between our characters at first. We were all in separate countries. But the plan was to come together against a greater threat somewhere in the midpoint of the story.
That's not too bad.
How did it feel as a role playing game?
It was different for sure, because you were waiting there for your turn like a lot more than in your typical role playing game, but those turns were so much more involved with your character. The dungeon master had all their focus on you, and there's a lot of tension that arises when you're playing as political leaders and you're responsible for things, not the mercenary jumping into a dungeon to see how much cash you can grab. But like, oh, well, my character in particular was a dwarven thane, and it's like, oh, there are child dwarves here, and there are dwarf merchants, and we're being invaded by orcs. What are we going to do about it? All these people are counting on you.
Was like, how did that feel when it wasn't your turn? Like, is that the drawback of that system?
It would well, it wasn't necessarily a system issue so much as it was the way that story was set up, with us all being separate rulers in separate countries and not having much interaction. It relied a lot on the fact that for one thing, we were all friends beforehand, so we enjoyed hanging out together. And second, the dungeon master and each of the players were doing a very good job telling an interesting story, where the other players could tune into that and wanted to pay attention rather than stacking dice towers or something.
So I disappeared from camera and earshot for a second. But as you were describing a lot of this, it reminded me very explicitly of, Legendary Games' Ultimate Kingdoms. So, and
Never heard of it.
It has rules. This is for Pathfinder 1e specifically. They got it for 5e. On running and ruling, building, starting a kingdom. Same premise. You're spending build points on your settlements. You're managing the dailies. You are taking care of the taxes. You are covering trade routes. You are managing the kingdom.
I'm very certain that Birthright was the father of those Ultimate Kingdom systems, and after playing the Ultimate Kingdom stuff, not a fan of it. I think it's a bad rule system. I'd much rather play Birthright.
I have found that things like that, especially like the Ultimate Kingdom rules, I really enjoy utilizing in downtime moments the most. That's where it seems to work out the best. So that way my players are, hey, let's spend 5-10 minutes on building our kingdom, and then let's get back to kicking ass and taking names. Or
do you mean downtime as in the party's downtime, or downtime like when you're not at the campaign at the session table?
Bro, it's both for me. I play this shit like 24/7. It's ridiculous. I have an idea, I present it to my party, we roll with it until we come back to the table, finish some loose ends, and then jump back into party shit. So, like my Facebook group chat for my party, it's usually nonstop. So, and it's not all memes either, which is kind of depressing. My first one was, and that was entertaining, but I ignored it. This one, less entertaining, way more intensive on purpose that I have to pay attention to. So, yeah, not a fan, but Caleb, you like that kingdom building? I like using it for downtime. I think it's neat.
How did your GM? Oh, sorry. How did your GM progress? Like the factions around you?
I think he was doing it. I didn't get a real good look behind the screen, but I think he was doing it as per the Birthright rulebook. Basically, they had their own turn in the kingdom initiative, and he wasn't going to go around and move all of the 163 city states or whatever, but at least one or two factions near each of the player factions was going to do something, and usually something that would spur a reaction from the player. Trying to think of an example. For me, it was usually orcs invading because my dwarven kingdom was right on top of an orc hole, as it were. And for the elven player, it happened to be a nearby human kingdom that was trying to cut down forests, which not just the elves are all about the environment or whatever, but in Birthright, your super kingdom level magic comes from the land. So the less spoiled the land is, the more powerful you are as a regent. So that directly interfered with their powers as a wizard.
Now I want to play some Birthright.
Yeah, because
I'm
knockoff
down
rules aren't as
anytime.
good. Right.
You also had talked about or at least you mentioned to us about the root system, and I really like how they do their faction. They're a very nice layout for how their factions interact with each other in between your players' turns, or like in between your players' actions.
It's definitely been a while since I did a close read of the rules or the character sheet, but I know it tracks reputation with each of the factions, and then anytime you're interacting with those factions, you get a bonus to like your charisma checks with them. And then the other main thing that I really like is that it pairs the whole faction game with the root board game. So I don't have to be coming up with components for these buildings or like where armies are or anything. I just take all the pieces from the root board game. There it is.
That was a neat thing that they had done there. I'd actually found the RPG before I found the board game.
Really?
So, yeah. So I thought it was pretty neat. I remember reading through the rules, and it's like, hey, try to go for your smaller animal anthropomorphic figures. Don't be a moose, I think was specifically called out. Thought that was neat. I like the theme of the game. So that was actually what captivated me to it. Before I read a friggin' dollar, I ordered the entire book and the expansion, and I think there was only one expansion when I got it. So I think there's two of them now.
Yeah, after coming from the board game to the RPG, the only thing I was surprised about the factions that they had is the factions from the book itself aren't actually very distinct. Like, they've got all these different moves to interact with reputation, but then nothing for each of the specific factions. And the only way that they slightly interacted was in the setup for like kind of playing the faction metagame behind the scene. I was actually kind of surprised by that. I thought there'd be a little bit more, but it's kind of just a -1 or a -2 here or there. Seems very little that's player interacting, like that you don't sense a difference in interacting with the factions mechanically.
Yeah, the board game is very asymmetrical, where the lizards are cultists and they play entirely different from the cat Marquise, who is very much just put as many troops on the board and make buildings. But I can see how for the RPG, being powered by the apocalypse, they would definitely just load that onto the narrative burden. Like, if the faction differences are mostly down to flavor and coming up with what types of items they're going to give to you, or what type of help they provide to your adventurers when you call on them.
I like that term, the narrative burden.
Sounds like you can pull some ideas from Ultimate Kingdoms by Legendary Games.
Are you sponsored, Rob?
No, I'm not. It's not a plug, but I honestly I love a lot of Legendary Games shit, dude. Like,
okay, well, what do you like about Ultimate Kingdoms, Rob?
I'm like 12 pages in. Don't ask me that question.
He's too busy playing games to read them.
So
you're 12 pages in?
Dude, this compiles all the books I've already read into one big one. You know how hard it is to read a second stereo manual a second time?
Why are you buying a second stereo manual if you already have all the originals?
Because this updated shit. There's more. There's more. I'm just trying to figure out what's different. So yeah, the basic here between is you take like a point system, build point system, wealth point system, etc. Certain things fluctuate your numbers. As your numbers change, they go up and down. Your faction changes to accommodate those numbers. Yes and no, big, high, small, slow, etc. Goals, all of those influence how the faction operates, which seems to be the core belief and mechanic in how this faction metagame seems to work. So whereas I've got less experience with it and how I generally handle it in my downtime, I'm following the same core principles. I'm just less experienced with the breadth of experience that they come from. Because I've got one book. You guys have Well, I own them too, but I don't play. I don't play them. They just sit on my shelf and look pretty. So
Yeah, I like the idea. It sounds there's a pretty limited point system there, limited resources that you have to mess with. Whereas, Birthright is, I love it, but that's kind of the opposite of that, where you've got many different numbers to track. You've got your like diplomacy, you've got your current gold bars, which is separate from your gold coins. Uh, you've got the development index of a state. You've got the magic index of a state.
see,
Another system slash game that I've heard about recently is the rain system. Either of you play or hear about that one?
no, that's
Rain
new to me.
system. No.
They just, I don't want to say recently, did a Kickstarter. It might have been a couple months back for their second edition. But that
Second edition. We haven't heard of it once.
How do you spell rain? Is it like rain? Like
REIGN, like the rule over.
rain.
Yeah.
You said that did it hit a chord? Do you know this one now?
It sounds familiar. I thought you meant rain, like the water falling from a cloud, and I was like, interesting. And all I was coming up with was like
very
hydrogeology. Yeah, I was like, interesting, but not what I'm looking for.
Right.
Yeah. No, this other rain system, it sounds pretty simplified, which is nice. It boils things down to like your treasury score, your intrigue score, your military might, and something else. Which I
shit you not. I've seen the cover to this book once. Atomic Overmind. Yeah. Caleb, you're it's something that you're kind of following along at least a little bit.
Yeah, where was it?
Did you back the Kickstarter?
I did not. I missed it, unfortunately, and I have to go back and buy it at some point. I'm not saying that this is something I read or I know about, but if our listeners or anyone is intrigued by faction rules, and this game was specifically designed, either you can run it as a system by itself. I believe it comes with a setting as well, but it's also meant to be layered over on top of whatever system you're running for your adventuring party. So you can just use Rain to handle the faction stuff.
I love that. I love separating and designing systems specific for different, if for managing your empire, use this system. For managing your character, use this system. It just makes them distinct, and you're able to put in all the details or all the information to convey how you want that aspect of your game to work.
So for Rain, I know as we're talking about it, we have the opportunity to kind of look into it. I want to read this for our audience here because it sells it well, and it keeps me quite interested. Rain expands the frontiers of fantasy gaming by elevating the action to an international stage. Monarchs and mercenaries gamble armies and fortunes to win nations in a rich and vibrant fantasy setting. Rain's simple but complete rules model the triumphs and disasters of societies as a small village or as a realm-spanning religion. With Rain, your characters can defend and bring prosperity to threatened lands, or, if you prefer, conquer and pillage on a vast and awesome scale. Powered by the one-roll engine, popularized by godlike, nemesis, and wild talents, Rain can take your characters from beggars to emperors. If you're already a fan of the ORE, Rain is familiar, though with a few interesting refinements. If it's new to you, the ORE resolves events in delicate detail without cumbersome layers of contingent roles. And that's kind of what we look for in a lot of our games now as we've progressed so far past our initial foray into D&D. Things that are simplified, but still somehow complex, entertaining, and easy to follow.
Have any of you played the one roll engine?
I did, if I remember correctly, I did a test play of Nemesis at a convention once.
I have not. unless I did it on accident and no one told me.
It looks
Yeah.
interesting. It sounds like you roll a pool of dice, and then you look for matches, and they call it like height and width. So like if you have three of a kind, then you have like a height of 3 and a width of 3, or so.
I don't know.
It's interesting.
That sounds weird. Sounds weird.
Sounds
However,
very weird, but also sounds interesting. You can look at one roll, and then it tells you, all the different aspects of you hitting, damaging, where you hit, all that jazz.
I mean, I gotta say,
I
it
like the
sounds.
concept.
Yeah, it's unique. I mean, we like things that are unique. So, you guys ever find like, I don't necessarily want to say a rule system, but it's the only way to describe it because we do it with settings all the time. But a rule system that's just unique enough where you have to buy it specifically just to own it. No intention to play, just I want this.
I know that there's definitely systems I have like that in my library.
Yeah, but you can't really name one right off the bat.
Well, the one I would name, the thing is, most of them catch me by setting first,
Okay.
and then it turns out, oh, they've hidden this very unique mechanic within it. But the thing that jumps to mind first is Dogs in the Vineyard by Vincent Baker.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if you guys have heard about that one.
Yep.
That is a Western situation, but specifically like a religious Western, whereas you play as the not Mormons in not Utah in not to the 1840s, and
That
you
is
are,
nuts.
yeah, you're representatives of the church going from town to town, bringing both your religious authority and also like the authority of the law. So there's gunslinging, there's heartfelt conversations with your what would you say, the members of the flock, as well as horseback riding, all sorts of adventure. But the thing that really caught my attention is the way the dice work, which is you have almost an obscene number of dice. We're talking like 20 to 25 dice on a roll sometimes.
What?
And then everyone has them like rolled right away. And then you go around playing poker. So the GM will make a move first and they'll put forward 2 dice, which like add up to a score. Then the next player who wants to go is going to put forward their 2 dice and try to match that. Or if they can match it or beat it using only 1 dice, then it trips up and they get an advantage in the story. It's very cool.
Cool. I take it.
Yeah. See, I've heard of it.
Like, what happens when you have used your entire dice pool?
So once you've used up all of your dice, you'll either have to like fold and accept the consequences of like whatever this conflict was about, or you can try and call in new dice by bringing in another one of the pieces of your character sheet. Like, for example, if you're talking to this outlaw or whatever, you're trying to talk him down, it's not really going so hot for you. You can then whip out your gun and point it at him, and okay, now I get to roll my gun dice, but things have just escalated, and he can choose to pull out his gun as well. And when all is said and done, and you start figuring out the consequences of this conflict, if you've gone from talking it out to shooting, you've just upped the fallout from like a temporary penalty, like reduced charisma, to something permanent, like dying because you got shot.
Right. That's kind of cool. I like that system. It's neat to listen to, and again, I've heard of the system. I kind of lumped it in with the same games as Kids in Space, Kids on Bikes, something on brooms. It felt like the same vibe. Artwork was similar, the whole deal. So I didn't actually buy in, but it's in my wait for it list.
You might be waiting a while. Last I heard, Vincent Baker called it off because he didn't really know how to approach the religious and indigenous situation that he set up in the book. So he either wanted to recircle it in a more sensitive way, or he might have just given up on it. So I don't know if it's ever coming to print.
That's a shame.
Drama. Seems like a good call.
Yeah, I mean, I hope he works it out and then like he puts out a nice hardcover because I would love to have that on my shelf. But not that I know of anytime soon.
That's fair. That's fair. Have either one of you guys gotten any new books on your shelves recently?
Nothing for my actual physical shelves. No.
And plenty of digitals. Okay. I was
Plenty
just
of digitals.
I was just gifted Numenera.
Oh,
Yeah.
I almost bought that one, but then I didn't. How do you like it?
Yeah. I'm like 2 pages in.
But were
So-
they a good 2 pages?
I don't know. I still read the copyright pages just to see if I'm on the right printing or not.
Ah.
So that does not count as a page for most people, but it's page 1 for me. But I like a lot of Monte Cook games. It's one of those things where back last year, Monte Cook had the Old Gods of Appalachia on Kickstarter. And I really wanted to back the project, but in the end of the day, I was like, honestly, I'm just buying flavor that I love, and I could put the flavor anywhere. So I decided against it. I regret that decision.
Well, if you do end up playing the Numenera, I recommend getting the cards for the Cipher system, because it just makes it massively easier to have your artifacts or whatever they're called. Like you get items that have special one-shot abilities. So much easier to have them as the cards in front of you, because then it's easy to pass them out, or even as a GM, just be like, draw randomly. Here's what you got.
I dig that. We talked about I've got the Cipher system toolkit, and trying to read through that confuses the shit out of me because there's no theme through it. So I've been hoping that Numenera will help teach me the system with at least a theme. I'm gonna need some flavor, but I dig it. I dig it. Oh man. So with that, I stayed up till 3 a.m. last night, and I got an hour of sleep. So
you must feel great.
No, I dragon, and like everybody under the sun knows about my hand issue, my arm issue. Now that I'm out of my splint for at least 1 hour at a time, 3 times a day, I'm supposed to do stuff with it, and my arm gets pain, I feel pain, and I get tired, even though it's just my arm that's fatigued and exhausted. It's so freaking weird, dude. I've not experienced anything like this before. But hey, I don't have to. It's not locked up in a jail.
Do you roll dice as physical therapy for that hand?
No, I just got released from my Splint's 24-hour lockup as of yesterday. So maybe this Saturday I'll give it a try. I opened a door though, and it hurt like hell. Like I don't know if you've ever experienced the just let's turn a doorknob and cry, but that is what happened. I'm not ashamed to admit it.
Doors continue to be the RPG community's #1 enemy.
I agree. Let's open them up. In our last few minutes here, I talked about, I wanted to pose a question to both of you guys, talk about it for a few minutes, and pose one to our audience because I'd really like to hear their input. So a little bit of history. Eli, I'm going to fill in as much as possible. If it's too much, let me know. If it's not enough, let me know.
All right.
I got a bad habit of being vague, and I can't do that this time. I've got a player who, because I do all of my games in-house, so we're all at the table, I got a player who brings his child. She is 5 or 6. Perfect. I've known this guy for 25 years. His daughter, friends with my children, all in the same age range. This last game, There was an entire epic meltdown from her that distracted the entire table. It was disruptive to the entire game, and also spawned an issue where she had tied up my son to a stroller with a bit of clothesline. And I mean, like, it was all over his body, around his neck, head, arms, the whole deal, and super dangerous. And he doesn't want to step away from the table. He's afraid he might have to. I don't want to kick him from the table because I enjoy his friendship. I enjoy having him here. And I don't know if this is a one-time situation or if it's progressively getting worse situation. I want to support him as a friend, as a DM, and as a fellow father. But not really sure what to do. It's kind of tough.
Yeah, I guess who's watching the kids while you play?
Well, we all got to take turns, and they stick rather close. So more often than not, they don't go entirely unsupervised. But it's a little bit more free-form for them at the time. Usually they stick to a pretty set, chill in front of a television, watch some TV, color, do whatever, play, run around the house like heathens. But when you have multiple children, they tend to find a group mentality that is a level baseline personality between all of them. So it doesn't deviate horribly on average. This was just one of those outlying scenarios. So first time, I don't want to say it's going to happen every time, but there's potential because of how outrageous this one was.
Well, I'm a young guy, not a whole lot of experience with kids outside of, my cousins and whatnot. I suppose the option of a sitter was probably already explored.
Yep.
Or them staying with this guy's partner.
Yep. So it's just kind of a weird scenario.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you got to talk to the kids. You got to make sure that they understand they can't be going crazy, going wild, and doing dangerous things with each other.
Right? Or if
your kids aren't able to interact and behave,
I think a suspension of sorts might be in order, not necessarily for this incident, but even for the kids. They, like you said, they have to understand that they can't be doing dangerous things, or they don't get to play with these other kids anymore. And
honestly, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. That I can tell my buddy, like, hey, you know what? It's not a you thing. Let's give the kids a few weeks off. Let's see if they can come back together, calm and level-headed, and explain to them what happened and why this is the way it is.
If they don't, in the future they get back together and they don't interact well, or you can ask this player to step aside.
He and I did talk about it, and he has already said that that would be his decision to do so. He wouldn't want to continue putting our children in a situation if it was as dangerous as it was last time. And not to mention, when you have 5 and 6-year-olds who lie because they're not familiar with right and wrong or the concept of what a lie actually is, and on top of that, how do you not gaslight them based on what they say, and how do you take everything they say at face value when you know it's not all there? It's weird when you're working with kids, like, damn. So I was also thinking about trying to find a way to rearrange some of my party members between 2 groups, get more kids together on one of the days, and then have a friend of mine come over and run a game for them. Something like Babies and Broadswords or Crawl of Cthulhu. Little Wizards, maybe.
Yeah, this is tough. This is a lot of parenting things, and as a GM, I try not to parent my players.
Right.
I can definitely see the kids having their own game as a possible solution if they're at the table kind of kids. But if they've got all that energy, they want to run around and be wild. Putting some dice in front of them might not work.
True. But it also gives them something to do with their hands, makes them think, and tell stories, which they all like. They all like parts of those, at least a little bit. So I might back pocket that one. But
then I'm cautiously optimistic.
I hope so. So I'm putting it to the audience. You guys, let us know if you guys have run into a situation that's been similar to this, or how you handle situations like this. I want to hear it. I want to know all about it because it's important. Most of us eventually grow up and have some form of family. Others decide to forego children, which is incredibly acceptable, but we'd always know somebody with a kid. And how does it interfere or affect their ability to game? I try not to let it interrupt mine. So, do you guys have anything you want to close out this week's episode with?
I don't think there's anything for me. Just happy to be here, give you guys my takes, and I look forward to being on in the future. I hope.
Yeah, Caleb,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
joining us, Caleb. It was fun talking.
Yeah, loved it. It was really good. And your time is valuable. So I really hope that we can keep you around next time. All right. You guys, check us out on Facebook or at epictablegames.com.
Okay, new intro. We've changed the name, and we're still using the word paladin. Paladin. I mean, it hasn't been used in the English language in about 200 years, but okay.